Tommy Elliott.
Bring your end to the left, gentlemen.
This is only 3 minutes long, but it's a good way to start.
All the way in.
Just so you know.
Where? All yours.
Give me pipe 11.
There's no business like show business, like no business I know. Everything about it is appealing, everything that traffic will allow. Nowhere could you get that happy feeling you get from stealing that extra bow. There's no people like show people, they smile when they are low. Yesterday they told you you would not go far. That night you open and there you are. Next day on your dressing room they've hung a star. Let's go on with our show.
Business like no business I know.
You get word before the show has started that your favorite uncle died at dawn. On top of that, your ma and pa have parted. You're broken hearted, but you go on.
There's no people like show people. They smile when they are low.
Even with a turkey that you know will fold, you may be stranded out in the cold, but still you wouldn't change it for a sack of gold. Let's go on with our show. Let's go on with the show.
Well, that is the start of our presentation about the history of Local 93 and its relationship with District 1 and the International. I've been asked to, the reason I'm doing a microphone is because this is being recorded. It's not that I couldn't yell at you people in here, you could hear me. But anyway, and if there's any, we want to thank Jay for coming in. Dave said we need a AV guy here, and Jay fit the bill. And he got his other arm back here recently, and so he's done a yeoman's job here. Anyway, I've been asked for a number of years to do something of a history class about Local 93, and so here we are tonight. And I guess they figured it was time to do it before, while I could still remember all the stuff about Local 93. And I can't remember it all, but I can remember quite a bit. And the only thing I would ask that George and Doug don't disagree with anything, because they're the only ones that have been around long enough that can disagree with stuff. But anyway, I disagree with that. Anyway. And some of you know, hey, he's an old guy. He's been around a long time. He's the guy that runs the crew at the Opera House. But I joined Local 93 in 1965, which I'll be coming up on 60 years in the local here next year. And so I've gotten all the pins, the accolades, and all that stuff that you can get. So I don't know what happens next. But anyway, I've held just about every office in the local except for one. And so I thought that Mr. Brusick, who has been was president for 25 years, should join me in this presentation, because he is really someone that knows a lot about the International, the district, and how they interact with each other. Whereas I'm more of I know about the early days of Local 93. And they're really important. And I don't, just because we're going to talk about the local in the early days. It doesn't mean we want to go back to that, but it's something that everybody should know where you came from, and I think that's really important because we've been around a long time. I remember a comment that a number of years ago we had an issue, and our business agent was Jackal Evans at the time, and Jackal Evans' comment was, "We've been around for 100 years. We're not going to let that guy screw it up." And you know, I think that's something that we need to remember now. We've been around for nearly 125 years now, and so those of you that are going to take this into the future need to remember how we got there. So anyway, we will start now, the history of Local 93. And if anybody thinks that I came up with this, I have a 15-year-old granddaughter that was a big help. So anyway, there we go. So, but we did it on the phone. She did a pretty good job. History, we're going to start off with the Auditorium Theater. Obviously, we have the Opera House now. At one time, we had the Auditorium Theater. It was located on Post and Main, and it was the largest stage in the United States from 1890 to 1914, when they built one in New York that was bigger. And there she goes, right there. And that place burnt down. I think it burned down twice before it finally was torn down. I think it burned down again, and then they finally destroyed it in the 30s. And it was a gorgeous theater. And rumor has it that would have been my great-great-grandfather worked at that theater. So anyway, so 1901, we didn't have the IATSE. Well, they had the IATSE, but Spokane was not part of it at that time. We had the Spokane Stage Employees Union, 24 members, and in 1902 it dissolved to become what we have now, Local 93 of the IA. And at that time, they started the Northwest Stage Association. They had a convention in Seattle, 1903, and the locals of the Northwest get together and chat just like we do now. But anyway, Mr. Brusick is going to talk a little bit about that here in just a few minutes. And 1904, we had another convention here in Spokane, and the International thought that this might be a competitive organization, so it was dissolved, and the Northwest Stage Association was no more at that point. One of the next big things was the operators. Many of you here, except for a few of you, don't recall that we had operators here. We are a mixed local. We're not a stage local, even though we don't have anything but stage. Well, we have stagehands, wardrobe, that hair, so that sort of thing. But usually when people think about mixed locals, it was operators and stagehands. And the operators in 1908 decided that they needed their own local, so they became Local 185. And when you come up here later, if you wish, there's some books with minutes of that go back as far as 1909, and they were handwritten. And so if you don't know cursive, you're in trouble. You're never going to figure out what they mean. But anyway, so 1908, Local 185 started. And then, in 1909, they realized the benefits of having this working together in a smaller area rather than just the international. And so with the help of the other Northwest locals, Local 93 presented a resolution at the convention that year to start districts. And I'm going to turn this over to Dave Brusick, and he's going to talk about districts and the international. Here you go, Dave.
Thanks, Pat. Anyway, Pat touched on some of the early days
I'll just read this quick little blurb here about how Local 93 was instrumental in starting the whole international district the way it is now. The early days were a constant struggle for survival, and Local 93 took an active role in leadership along with other IA locals in the Northwest. The first Northwest Stage Employees Convention was held, like Pat said, in 1903 in Seattle, with delegates from Seattle, Portland, Spokane, Boise, Vancouver, BC. This organization was the predecessor of District 1 as we know it now. The association's second convention was held in Spokane in May of 1904. About this time, rumors circulated at the New York IA office that the Northwest Association was formed for the purpose of seceding from the IA. An order came down from the IA office for all locals to withdraw from this association. Hence, the Northwest Stage Association was dissolved. Realizing the benefits, though, that had been achieved by locals that were in the same geographic area, working together, Local 93, prior to the 1909 International Convention, sent its delegate, H. Hollinger, on a trip to visit other locals of the Northwest to get support in presenting a resolution at the IA Convention that would call for the formation of districts as we now know them. This was approved in July 1909. So that's, because this was kind of hatched by someone from Local 93 and the Northwest, that's why we are District 1. And as President Loeb likes to refer to us as District Fun. Anybody that's been at a district meeting, they tend to be kind of fun. So the International has 14 districts. And I've got the information for our district up on top, the contact information, things like that. And this map will show you, and geographically, we may be maybe the second largest or maybe the largest, but all the concentration of membership is right over here in Local 1 and all around the Northeast. District 1, Jay, would you bring up that District 1 that shows all the locals? District 1, it consists of 16 separate locals. Local 15 is a stage local in Seattle. Local 28 is a mixed local in Portland. Local 93, we're a mixed local. 154 is a mixed local in Ashland, Oregon. 240 is Billings, Montana. It's a mixed local. Although I've been associated with the IA and the district for probably 30 years, I've never seen anybody from Billings at any functions. They're pretty much non-existent. 339 is Great Falls. They're fairly active. They have a good stage presence in Great Falls. A lot of you are familiar with 488, the Studio Mechanics. We also have in the district what they call national locals, which are they have representation in every district, but they're on a national scale, and that'd be Local 600, the cinematographers, 700, the Editors Guild, 800 art directors, 829 scenic artists, and then Eugene is also a mixed local, 675. Seattle has its own wardrobe local as well as a stage local, and that'd be Local 887, the wardrobe local. 891 is the stage local in Anchorage, and B20 is the ticket sellers and ushers, and they're representing workers in Portland. So as you can see, District 1 represents Washington, Idaho, Montana, Alaska, plus 4 national locals. As far as how the district is operated and run and who runs the district has a constitution and bylaws like all locals do. They have officers and staff. Jay, you can, is that officer staff? Yeah, which consists of the secretary, who quite frankly does like most secretaries in most organizations, they're the ones that do most of the work. District chair, in this case, our district chair happens to be Radar Bateman, and he's also an international rep. We also have trustees who do an audit of the district books on an annual basis. Financial assistant, who's basically a treasurer, and the legislative chair. In case none of you realize it, the IA is big into political action and legislative activities. We haven't ever been particularly politically active around here, and we get a lot of flack from the district and the IA about that on a constant basis. And also we have a very active women's committee in the district. The district's run by what they call the advisory board, and the advisory board consists of one member from each local. So in theory, there could be 16 members on the advisory board. That's not always the case. The districts are required by the International to have a convention each year, and the advisory board meets as necessary, generally via Zoom meetings these days. I want to touch a little bit before I'm done here on the International Convention delegates. A local is entitled to one delegate for its charter. The second delegate comes, the way it's worded in the International Constitution, is that after that, there's one delegate for every 100 members or major portion thereof. What that means is when we hit 51 members, we got a second delegate. For us to get a third delegate to a convention, we'd need to have 151. Some of the large locals, Local 1, for instance, in New York, some of the big locals, they've got to have 20 or 30 delegates that show up at the conventions. Eligibility to be a delegate. Article 4 of the International Constitution says that any member in good standing, provided they're chosen by secret ballot, or if the local constitution or bylaws so provide. Our Constitution happens to read that the business agent is the first delegate and the president is the second delegate. Alternates will be voted on by a vote of the membership. The IA has more than 360 local unions that represent over 170,000 workers in live theater, film, motion pictures, television, broadcasting, and the trade show business has become a huge part of the IA lately. So, and like the slogan says on your bulletin when you get it or whatever, we are the union behind entertainment. So, any questions about the district, how it operates, how we're a part of it? Oh, and the district operates, they're funded by a per capita tax per member. Each member or each local pays I can't remember what the per capita is right now, to the district for the operation of the district. So that's how that works. Oop. All right, thanks.
Thank you, Dave. It's okay, so that takes us up to 1909. Now we're going to move on. And in the 20s, I always like to add, in the 20s, it was one of the negatives of that era was that was the first time when the sound people started getting involved in our international. And anyway, sometimes that goes over, sometimes not so much. I can't knock Jay today because he's really helped us a lot. There you go. Anyway, you always treat the sound. If you're a light guy, you can turn the lights off too. But anyway, in the 20s, when we had silent films and that sort of thing, but when they put sound on films, they became way more popular. And a lot of the theaters in this area, Spokane had approximately 20 different theaters that showed film. And many of you were have you been to the Rocky Rococos? That's an old movie theater. There's one on Riverside And I can't remember, the building is still there. It's obviously not a theater anymore. But if you look at it, yeah, hey, that looks like it could have been a theater at one time. And there were a number of them around. But when that happened, the theaters, like you saw the picture of the auditorium theater, was gorgeous theater, but it didn't show movies. It was a live playhouse, much like the Opera House here. And consequently, when movies started getting more popular, the theater business, the live theater business, started going downhill. And that was a negative for the stagehands that were involved, positive for the motion picture operators that were involved. And that's where we were in that era from the 20s to the 50s. And I just threw this one in because I need to talk about it, because many of you know where you might even park there occasionally, at the Parkade. That was one of the theaters that bit the bullet and was torn down, the Orpheum Theater. It says here it's the Pantages, but that was, this was probably in the 20s when that picture was taken. And that was the Orpheum Theater where the Parkade is now. And that was gone. That was a very, very nice theater. And but then we get into things about the local. And as I discussed, the operators got stronger, the stagehands got weaker, and in 1953 they had something called an amalgamation. A lot of people say, what is that? That sounds pretty technical, and it was. And it took years to accomplish this, because we had a local that was probably made up of around 40 people. 30 of them were operators, 10 of them were stagehands. You had a local stagehand, Local 93, that had 10 stagehands, and 185 had approximately 30 operators at that time. And those are just numbers, guesses. Anyway, they amalgamated and became one local. And the politics, you can imagine, in those days was, if the president elected was an operator, the vice president had to be a stagehand. If you had two operators, or you had three operators on the executive board, you had to have two stagehands. And it went on that way for years and years and years. And we have copies of those old Constitution bylaws, and the reality is, you can't change them, because you had to be a voting member of the local in those days to change the bylaws. Of course, all those people are deceased now. But anyway, obviously it wasn't legal, and times moved on. But the amalgamation was a big part of Local 93's history. In 1963, we started the projection service. And we're fortunate to have George here, who is, has run the production service for years. It was called the projection service originally, and it was designed to get operators work. Had some 16 millimeter equipment. They would rent it out very cheaply as long as you hired an operator to operate it. And then it became eventually the payroll service that we enjoyed for many, many, many years. Now, probably the biggest thing that happened to the local in more recent history, although recent history to me it was 50 years ago when this building was built for the World's Fair. And many of the members that guided the local for the last 50 years became members of Local 93 at that time. At that time, I was a young member, had been around for quite a while, because my family had been in the business a long time, but this is when a lot of the newer members came in that now you consider the old timers, George, Doug, Dave, that sort of thing. The World's Fair was a huge, huge, huge benefit, not just to Local 93, but Spokane. We didn't have a facility like this that we're sitting in right now. 1981, women joined the local. It's been a long time, but Maria Graf was the first member of the local, and she passed away a number of years ago. But she was a real dynamo. And then after that, we took in more ladies, in our 100th anniversary program, which is up here, you can see a picture. There's a picture of the women of Local 93. Many of you, or some of you, are sitting right here, right now. And wardrobe workers, and eventually, all parts of the craft. So, anyway. So we weren't the first to start doing that, but we jumped on board, In 1987, something happened that was as big probably almost as Expo 74, and that was West Coast Entertainment. 1987, Cats came to Spokane. It was the first Broadway production, not the first Broadway production, it was the first series Broadway production that West Coast started. And obviously, yesterday we worked one of their shows here. And that has been a huge benefit to the local and those of us in this industry. In 1990s, projectionists, those motion picture operators that I discussed, they became extinct. There wasn't any more. The assistant manager would go and hit the button, run the video, and see you later. And that's pretty much what happened. And we had a few of them hang around that for years that worked as stagehands, part-time. But basically, in the 1990s, the projectionists became extinct. Another big one for Local 93, in 96, the Public Facilities District, the new arena was built. That was, the arena is the physical thing that you see, but the Public Facilities District, which took over the management of the entertainment facilities that we are part of here in Spokane, took it over from the city. And I worked for the city at the Coliseum, the old Coliseum, for 15 years, and they didn't spend a nickel. They didn't have to. And as you can see from sitting in this facility that we're in right now, it's 50 years old. And the Public Facilities District has spent a lot of money maintaining it and keeping it modern. And we have more and more of the shows, as many of you are aware, come in here and are shocked that this place is 50 years old. So that was a big, big benefit for us. 2000, this was the year that your computers were going to quit working, and as the clock switched over and everything was going to go to hell in a handbasket. But in the West Coast Entertainment, and I have to mention him, our friend Jack Lucas, who was the president of the West Coast at that time, he thought the year 2000 needs to be a big year. And so we had Les Mis, Phantom of the Opera, and Miss Saigon all in that one season. The only three cities that have had the road production of these three shows in one season are Toronto, Vienna, and Spokane. And that's still a big feather in the cap of Local 93. So anyway. Okay, now this brings us, we jump forward 20 some years now to the present. But this is about the history, so I didn't want to talk about the current stuff because most of you are aware of that and can probably find out more information from others more suited than myself. But what I would say is this. Right now, Local 93 has 24 contracts signed, and this is, to me, who has been a member for nearly 60 years, that's an unheard of thing. We worked for a lot of years. We didn't have any contracts. We had what they call memorandums of agreement, and that meant that as long as you did a good job and they liked you, they would keep hiring you if you didn't make too much money, pretty much, because you had no real solid in. Now we have contracts. We have a very good relationship with Public Facilities District. As you can see here, we're here tonight doing a training class, and they did everything they could to make it as nice for you people and us as they could. So I guess this is a good time to, first of all, when you get done, come up here and look at some of the displays. This is our charter from 1902, and it hangs in the break room downstairs. It is, and that's the original. That's it. So, and we have some material up here, old minutes, just not really, just so you can look at them and see what they are. Is see that this is not just coming and working a concert or a Broadway show. There's been a lot of history here. And so I'd like to throw it open to any questions, if anybody has any, for myself or Dave or anybody else here. So otherwise, I told Dave we'd be done in half an hour. We were 1 minute long. So anyway, thank you very much for coming. And any questions, be happy to answer them.
Sort of a comment-ish question because of the Masonic organization that was the turn of the 20th century and how that building fit in with the IATSE and Local 93. When you know the history of some of that, because my understanding is the auditorium at the old, which is now Riverside Place,
Mm-hmm.
was one of the first places that film projection was being shown to the public. And when I worked there and closed that building out before it changed over to Riverside Place, I mean, I was in rooms and closets and in corners
Yeah.
and in the projection rooms that had some of the old glass slides and the projectors in
Yeah.
them. So I'm curious at what that was. And I don't know if everybody's aware that at the time of the turn of the 20th century when IATSE was first coming around, Spokane was the largest city in the state of Washington. It was the largest city in this part of the world. And so when you correlate that with Local 93, the importance of what our local was in entertainment on this side of the country. So I don't know if you can speak to any of that.
Well, the only thing one thing I can speak to is if the entertainment industry in this area was a big deal, and I would say one of the few places that is left that you might see some of that taste would be at the Masonic Temple, and fortunately, Dave worked there as a youngster. Dave worked there as a youngster, and if you go down there, yeah, you see a fly system that has 4-inch centers. Yeah, and of course, ours has 6, and they complain because they'd rather like to have 8-inch centers because of all the big stuff we hang nowadays. But this area was huge in that era, and that's one of the reasons. You know, a lot of people, because there's been a Devereaux in Local 93 for a long time. I take a certain amount of heat for that. But my grandfather joined the local in 1909. He was not there in 1902. But his father-in-law was. And so my grandmother was a Quinn. And if you look at our charter, there are 3 Quinns on the charter as charter members. And so we go way, way, way back. And but this area was big. This was, you came from Minneapolis, and the first place you hit was Spokane that was of any size, or culturally, it was a big deal. And unfortunately, if you look if you can have access, we have a book that was put together for our 100th anniversary. Unfortunately, they only made 1 copy. And we are in the process of trying to replicate that, but there's some maps about all the different theaters that were in existence then, and there was a lot in this area, in this downtown area. And the theaters that stayed were the Fox and the Bing, which was the Clemmer, the State, and a number of other names. But and they weren't in the downtown area; they were on the outskirts, in those days. Now we think they're downtown, but they weren't downtown then. The downtown ones got torn down for parking lots, unfortunately. So anyway, Post Street was torn down for a parking lot. That was on Post, River Park Square, that area. Similar to where... we had members working there with the symphony. Yes, we worked the symphony at the Post Street prior to going to the Fox, and it was a hemp house. And I know, I was an apprentice there. Yeah, yeah, Jason.
Just on that subject, I know when I first came to Spokane, there was a little theater that I thought was a movie theater, 2 screens. That was the Post, I thought. Is
Yep.
that the same
Yep.
building?
Yeah.
Okay.
That was it was a movie theater. It was a pretty big theater. It was it wasn't as big as the Fox, but it was similar to the Fox. It had 3 stories, and it had trap doors in the stage, and you had to go outside to get to from stage right to stage left and that sort of thing. They were small and tiny, but I made $16 working children's theaters there when I was in high school. Cash. So, anyway. Okay, any other questions? Well, thank you for coming. I hope it was worth your time, and because it is your local, and you need to know the history of your local.